Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing bracketology for the Kentucky Wildcats and where they fall in the latest edition of bracketology from Joe Lunardi and ESPN. Also going to be discussing Kentucky versus Florida this weekend. I think it's a pretty big game for the Wildcats this Saturday. Going to discuss what we think about the Wildcats 4 games into the season. Not a whole lot to take away on the surface, but I think this one will be really telling of what the Wildcats may be capable of this upcoming season. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the show. If you're listening on podcast, would really appreciate it if you followed along on podcast as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. There was a bracketology update about a week or so ago from Joe Lunardi of ESPN. We've kind of dogged ESPN's bracketology in the past, and I felt like, why not? Let's do it again today. Let's do it one more time. So if you go and look at the ESPN bracketology right now, again, it's preseason. So this is preseason. Not a whole lot to really understand or know about these teams before they actually start playing basketball. For instance, I guarantee you there's going to be a team in the top 10 here that just absolutely bottoms out at the beginning of the season. That is just flatlines. You're going to see a team do that. You're going to see a few teams in the top 25 just completely wet the bed. But I think that it is worth paying attention to, who are some of the teams that we should be looking at heading into this year. If you look at this bracketology, and apparently Kentucky is not necessarily one of them. According to this latest bracketology from ESPN, UK is a 6th seed in the West Division of the bracket. Now, it doesn't really matter if Kentucky was in the West, the East, the Midwest, or the South. It really doesn't matter what division they would be in. The point is that Joe Lunardi thinks Kentucky, heading into this year, is a 6th seed. The preseason ESPN way too early top 25, whatever you want to call it, the way too early top 25 for basketball, I think was just updated a few days ago. We did an episode on it. Kentucky's number 17. I think they should be a little bit higher, but who cares? It's preseason. UK here being a 6th seed, though, heading into this year, just to give you an idea, that puts them on par with a team like St. Mary's, a team like UCLA, a team like USC, who we're going to find out a lot about here during their non-con slate with their young players. Very talented team USC is. It also puts you on par with a team like, if you're looking at the 7 seeds, TCU, Memphis, Auburn, Wisconsin, and if you look at the 5 seeds, Baylor, Alabama, then you've got Illinois and Villanova. So Kentucky hovering around an area where you've got some pretty good basketball teams, but not necessarily elite ones. I talked about this as we got closer to seeding earlier this year, and I'll probably emphasize this again. I mean, if you're a 6th seed, it truly just does rely, your path to success does just truly rely on your matchups. It's not necessarily like, oh, you can get excited about like maybe getting an upset here or there. It's just like, it truly does matter. It's like, is your division weak? If it is, you have a chance. Kentucky had a chance last year to beat Kansas State and move to the Sweet 16, and then who knows what could have happened after that. But history shows 6 seeds don't really get very far, almost ever. So this would not be a great spot, I think, upon reflection, upon seeing it, for the Wildcats to be in. They'd play a team like, Dayton, Kansas State actually is projected 11 seed, Providence. You could also see them play Virginia, St. John. Oh, I would not want to play Virginia in the first round as a 6-11 matchup. That's evil. That's just wrong. That's brutal. But Kentucky, I think, deserves to be higher here. I think they do. I think they deserve to be a 5 seed or higher. I think Kentucky basketball is going to find success in the SEC. They're going to pick up more quality wins than they did a season ago, and it's going to boost the resume. You look at this non-con slate, too, by the way. We've talked a lot about this non-con slate. To go over it again, Gonzaga, North Carolina. You're going to play teams like Miami. You're going to play teams like Kansas. If you're able to get some quality wins there, unlike you were a season ago, I mean, you're going to be seeded higher. You're just going to be. Even if you have double-digit losses on your record, you're still going to be seeded higher because of how good your resume is against some of these better teams. So I think Kentucky has the opportunities, will take advantage of them, and will find themselves seeded higher at the beginning of the postseason. At this beginning of the preseason, though, I think just projecting out in terms of talent roster and in terms of what they could do in their own conference, I'm a little bit higher on the Wildcats than maybe some other outlets are, and clearly ESPN's not that high. So if you've got any thoughts on the way too early top 25 or the bracketology here from ESPN, you can leave it in the YouTube comments below. I want to tell you guys about our friends over at DoorDash. Love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door? Well, with DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week with last-minute orders and get your cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver to your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order from DoorDash. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or they will make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. And if you want even more value, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. You can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. Again, that's 50% off up to $20, no min subtotal, and $0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app from the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONCollege. Don't forget, that is code LOCKEDONCollege for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you once more. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. If you've not checked out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Andy Patton and Isaac Shade, you need to go ahead and do so. They do great work over there on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. They have myself on to talk about what's going on with the Wildcats. They have experts. They have coaches. They have analysts. A lot of different people on to discuss what's going on in the college basketball world. And now is the time to go and subscribe because we are getting closer and closer to the start of the season. I actually just got back home from watching a 3-hour practice of an SEC basketball school. I won't name one, but it wasn't the Wildcats, but I got to see it in person. And let me tell you something. I'm very happy that college basketball is almost back. So please go check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast wherever you get your podcast, or you can find them on YouTube if you want to subscribe there. All right, Kentucky football, I think, has a very big home game this weekend. They are taking on the Florida Gators in what has been a little bit of a run here in this rivalry between the Wildcats and the Gators. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and you already know this if you've been following along with the Wildcats and Mark Stoops, 4-0 is Kentucky football after a very easy start to their September slate. And this is where things kind of kick up for the Kentucky Wildcats. If you go and just meander your way on over to Kentucky's schedule, you'll see that this weekend against Florida, against the 22nd ranked Gators, is not your one stop here before you kind of ease back into maybe some easier competition. I want to read for you here Kentucky's next 6 games, okay? Their next 6 games before they finish out the year with South Carolina and Louisville. So they play Florida this weekend, ranked 22nd in the country, again, of the Gators. Then they go on the road to number 1 Georgia. Then they play at home against number 23 Missouri. Then they play at home against number 21 Tennessee. Then they go on the road to Mississippi State, and then they play at home against the 12th-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranked teams there, and you could, if you really wanted to make the case, for Louisville potentially being a top 25 team at some point here within the next couple of weeks, I mean, you could absolutely do it. Now, Louisville's going to have to prove themselves on the road this week at NC State, and they're probably going to have to get by, I would say, Notre Dame to get ranked here. And they do get the Fighting Irish at home. I just want to point that out here. But yeah, this is the beginning of a very tough stretch for Kentucky football. They are one of three teams in the SEC that are undefeated. One of the three teams left. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think the majority of the reason that is because of how easy things have been up until this point. They have one of the weakest strength of schedules in the entire country. I think it's actually second weakest out of 133 Division I FBS teams. You played Ball State. You beat the brakes off of Ball State. Didn't look phenomenal in the process. You scraped by Eastern Kentucky in what was a very disappointing game for me as a fan. You go and beat Akron by 32 points, 35-3. Kind of saw some good things in that game, and then you go on the road and you pants Vanderbilt. You should have won that game, I think, by a little bit more after you started the game off really hot. Let the Commodores come back into it. A couple of interceptions from Devin Leary, not the best thing in the world. So now here you are 4-0, not the most perfect 4-0 in the world, but it's really hard to let things down, especially given your opponents thus far. And then here come the Florida Gators, one of the more confusing teams right now in college football to me. Because go and look at their schedule. Look at what they've done. They start the year with a 24-11 loss to Utah. Utah playing their backup quarterback. They still haven't gotten a snap out of Cam Rising yet. Go on the road and they drop 11 points in the season opener. Not great. Not great. Second week of the season, 49-7 over McNeese State. Hey, you know what? That's awesome. That's awesome. You get a nice win at home. Then you go and play the Tennessee Volunteers. I actually picked them to win this game over Tennessee. They won 29-16. Looked really impressive in that win. So now you got an SEC win and a top 15 win under your belt. And you're starting to feel good about yourself. You know, your defense has been pretty dang good thus far this season. Feeling confident. And then you go and you play Charlotte at home 22-7. You score 22 points in this one against the 49ers, and I'm not talking San Francisco. A little confused by this game. I didn't actually go and have the opportunity to watch this one all the way through. The rushing numbers from this one were not particularly impressive. I can only assume that Charlotte held on to the ball for a relatively decent amount of time. Florida, a couple of turnovers in this one, a couple of fumbles that they lost that maybe gave Charlotte an opportunity to make this thing a little bit closer than it should have been. I don't know also if there were any missed field goals in this that would have possibly made this a larger loss here. No, actually, Florida's field goal kicker went 5 for 5, so they just simply could not finish drives. All right, wow. So you lose to a good team, you beat a good team, and then you struggle against a bad team heading into this one. What are the Florida Gators? Well, I think their defense is pretty solid. I think that's fair to say that their defense is good. But at the same time, I'm not exactly sold on Graham Mertz and their offense. Does Florida need to run the football to be a successful team? Right now, I think so. Sure, Graham Mertz and this Florida offense, they're completing 77% of their passes. But I think that putting the ball in the hands of Graham Mertz and forcing him to beat you on the road this weekend is what we're going to have to see out of Kentucky. This is a big, big turning point for UK. They have to be able to expose Florida's weaknesses. Florida is not a perfect team. Neither is Kentucky. If we are going to see the Wildcats make a push to be something more than they were a season ago, we're going to have to see them push some buttons on Florida's keyboard here. We're going to have to see them make the Gators uncomfortable. And my concern in this one has to do with more of Kentucky's issues than it does Florida's strengths, which is why I keep going back to, in my mind, this is such a big matchup this weekend for Kentucky just to see what they're made of. Because you get Bama, you get Missouri, and you get Tennessee at home. You should be very thankful that your SEC West opponent, your rotational SEC West opponent, is not on the road this year. Thank goodness that that's going out the window in future slates. Maybe not if you're a Kentucky fan, if you want to really dive into it. But point being here, you have to make a statement this weekend. And you have to clean things up. The turnovers are not that great. The Kentucky offense, a little turnover prone. Okay? The ability to run the football, I think is going to be very important against this Florida front. Are you going to be able to do it? Not quite sure. Not quite sure. On top of that, if I'm not mistaken, Florida currently has the best pass defense in the SEC. I'm going to need to fact check that real quick, but I am 95% sure that they actually have the best passing defense, and they do 162 yards passing a game. Pretty daggum good. At the same time, though, they've not really done a whole lot in the takeaways department, but point being, Kentucky's got some issues that they can get past this weekend. But we need to see them actually go and do it. And that's the question until we get to Saturday. Will we see the Wildcats do it? Because I'm not completely sold on this Kentucky team yet, but I expect them to be better. We walked into this season talking about the pieces on the offense, about how we expect them to be taking steps forward. They're nearly top 25 in points per game. I think they do a pretty decent job throwing the football around whenever they aren't turning the ball over. I mean, this offense should be taking that next step in a game like this. This is the one. This is the one that will help you define the rest of your season, whether or not you're going to be good against teams like Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisville. You have to be able to get this one. Are you going to win on the road in 2 weeks in Athens at night? Probably not. Probably not. But if you can get this one, I think it'll get you closer to where you want to be this season, what you want to accomplish. Again, Florida has issues, as does Kentucky. Who makes the statement this weekend? I want to see the Wildcats do it. I hope they do it. If you have any thoughts on the game this weekend, you can leave that in the YouTube comments below, or you can hit me on the socials. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.